A bit louder.
No, I do.
Yeah. Good morning. Good morning. Are we ready to start, please? Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Terry Daubney, and I'm the chair for today. And to my right, I have Councillor Paul Rivers, the chair of the board, but acting as vice chair today, and my right-hand man today. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome for coming. Thank you for coming, rather, and welcome. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Just Daniela Slatehome, who is the co-optee.
Thank you very much. Are there any declarations? Thank you. None at all. And now if we go to the notes from the previous meeting, which was on the 29th of June. Do we have any questions on that? You don't? Yes, Chris.
Chris, press your button, would you?
Chris, could you press the button, please? The middle one. So used to not being in here. Yeah. Yeah, just this question for Andrew, really. This question that I put in there for the reletting time frame. And he agreed to let me know when the relet period starts.
Yes, I did find out about that. And I can't remember the answer. Annalisa, can you remember the answer? Sorry, Chris.
Should be part of your DNA. The void period is from when the previous tenant leaves and their tenancy ends. So it's not necessarily when they walk out of the building, it's when their tenancy legally ends. And the start of the end of the relet process is when a new tenancy starts. So it's tenancy end and tenancy commencement is the full period, the relet period that we monitor. But obviously there's lots of elements within that, lots of different services are involved. And so we do have internal operation stats that will look at how long it took the work to be done and how long it took for the letting to happen. And we try and make those things happen at the same time. But the answer to your question is the relet period is from the tenancy legally ends and when the new tenancy legally starts.
But that's not general knowledge though, is it?
Well, I thought it was until this last meeting, so we'll make sure that that's clear.
Yeah.
You've now been educated.
Thank you. And it will be in the notes, so for this meeting.
So I think one of the questions was about the gas software. So it's actually a compliance software. So it deals with all the compliance of the big 6 items to gas, electric, lifts, water, etc. So it's something we purchased earlier this year. It was a Waverley initiative, not a contractor initiative, and it basically all the certificates are inserted or produced from the contractors, put into the software. I don't want to say it reads it, it sort of lifts it, it understands it, and it validates the certificate, and then, but it does all of them, so it does 100%. So previously, where we didn't have any software, we'd be very much reliant on a manual intensity to do that. I mean, then we couldn't do 100%, so it would be a smaller percentage. So it reads it, it understands it, it says yes, it's compliant, or no, it's not. If it's not, then we can look at it and then go back to the contractor to understand why it's not compliant. It may be something very simple, like it couldn't pick up the signature or an incorrect date, or it could be something a bit more, you know, something's out of its parameters. So that's how it does it. That's how it reads it. It then stores it, and then we've got access to all the certificates in one place. So that's ultimately what it can do. And then from that, it can then allow us to get statistics and data and monthly stats and dashboards and pretty pictures at some point with all the pie charts and graphs to say how compliant we are. So that's basically what we're working towards. So we've got the gas on. It's been quite a labour intensive project to get going, more labour intensive than we anticipated. So we've got gas on now. That's almost there. We're in the process of putting electric on, and that's been it's quite a steep learning curve because there's numerous contractors in the past that have done our electrical certificates. And then we'll be moving along and doing the rest as we go. So we'll be doing it one step at a time. So that was the compliance software. It's called TCW, by the way. So that's what it's called. And then the other question, I believe, was about capped gas. So as I've noted, as a general rule, from now on, we won't be capping any gas where we have tenants. So we would only generally cap a property where it's void. So and we can work on it, and then it gets uncapped once the tenant moves in. So we won't be capping any gas where there's tenants unless it's a health and safety risk. So for example, we've had a recent case where we've really struggled to get into a property to do its annual service. We've had to go to court, and only when we've got the court action and we've gone in, and then we've gone in, found that there was no money on the meter, so we couldn't actually do the service. The tenant didn't seem to be particularly engaged about trying to get money on it straight away, so we've had to cap it to ensure that for his and her health and safety, and for ours to know that once the money is then on the meter, then we can go back and re-establish the connection. We have had a number of, so we've done a bit of a gas audit over the last few months, as you'll probably be aware, and we have found that we do have a number of properties that have been gassed that we weren't either aware of or historical. So our housing officers are working with these tenants to understand why they don't want gas, what the issues are, is it financial, is it other issues? So we're working through those as we go. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask a question on that. When you said you got into the property and there was no money on the meter, I mean, that to a degree tells me that maybe they don't have sufficient funds to actually put the money on, but you've capped off their gas, so then they can't cook. If they've got a gas cooker, they can't cook. So it's a bit of a serious situation, because I understand where you're coming from with the safety of gas, but then this person might not have any funds. So how do we go on
completely
there?
agree. So it will be a case by case. So the housing officer was there. In this case, they were working. We felt it was reasonable that they could put the funds on, but it was a different issue why they weren't putting the funds on. However, you're absolutely right. It's a wider issue. We don't want to be doing, we need to be engaging, or we are engaging with the housing officers every time to understand the reasons why. So if it's just 20 or 30 pounds and you can see that they've got issues financially, there are other areas we can go to support that, and our housing officers are now sort of engaging with that process. I think it's been a bit of a historical one. We're starting to move forward with that.
Yeah, it's okay to just reiterate that point, that we are looking at this as a holistic view. We're working with the property services team, the gas contractor, and our housing officers, because as you say, if we're not getting access or somebody's had their gas capped, there's probably a story and a situation that goes with that, and we need to check on safeguarding issues and making sure we're working with tenants to make sure that they've got a safe, warm home to live in.
Matt, well, and Lisa too, really. Is there ever any reason why a tenant should choose not to use gas? Is there any, well, I'm really just trying to dig into, I mean, presumably a great majority of our houses are provided with gas, but is there any, I don't want to use the word legitimate, but any really good reason why we would let people not use gas?
In short, no. We have got a few tenants we are working with now that are refusing to have it. I don't want it. You know, I've never had it. I don't want it. I've got a couple of electrical heaters. So we're working with them. It's a tricky one as to insist on having it uncapped. It's probably actually safer to cap it, but it's still there available if they need it with, you know, reasonable notice. We can then uncap it. But we also want to make sure that whatever heating they are using is safe. We don't want them to be telling us that they've got a couple of bar heaters in the front room, but there's lots of paper and hoarding issues and other things that go with it. So this is why it's as Annalisa said, it's a bit of a holistic view and understanding the real reasons why they do not want it. But it is, you know, we're talking almost single figures. It's really minimal.
Any further questions? Thank you. Well, we'll now move on. Do we have any questions from the public for this meeting?
No, Chair, none received.
Thank you. Or questions from members?
No, not that I know of.
Yes, we do. The left. Yeah.
I'm not quite sure whether it's relevant now to ask this question or through the document. But I have had complaints about Williams turning up for jobs and not letting the tenants know that they're going to be there. And the person that actually has spoken to me has had scaffold erected around her house. They didn't know the scaffolders were coming. So they suddenly turned up one morning and then asked the tenant where they wanted the scaffolding put, because they hadn't been told by Williams where the scaffolding was to go, though it was to do a chimney. So they then went away, put the scaffold up and went away. Nobody came from Williams, and it's been a fortnight. They don't put a note, they don't send to say they want to make an appointment. They put a note through to say they've been. If the person's at work, well, they can't be helped. But they were told by the person that put the note through, if you don't respond, or if you're not in after two visits, you have to go back to Waverley and start again. Well, I don't understand this, because I thought that Williams was supposed to make an appointment with the tenant to actually attend, so that they could take a day off or whatever, or arrange for somebody to be at the property. And this doesn't appear to be happening. So again, we've got this problem with Williams that, you know, our tenants are really suffering for it, because they want the work done. Actually, it's a damp issue that's being resolved. So they've got the issue of they don't know when the person's coming. They can't just take days and days off work. So I'm wondering how this can be resolved, really. I know we're going to have Williams in to talk to us, but I think it's something that needs to be sort of looked at quite quickly, really. Thank you.
Just before I asked Rob to say something in a minute, but I think there are quite a few of the tenants in this room, myself included, that have had issues with scaffolding being erected. It's very short notice and then left there for many months doing nothing. And maybe Rob can just let you know about his situation. Yes, my neighbour, next door neighbour, had the scaffolding up for 3 months. It's gone this week, but they never told her they were coming. They just arrived about 7:30 in the morning, never said they were coming. And when the scaffold has been taken down, the rendering's been damaged and several parts of the walls been damaged where they anchored the scaffolding to the walls. They were supposed to move the scaffolding over to my house to do the roof, but the bloke said we haven't had no order, so we're taking it away. So think what you may. Thank you. Sorry. I think Chris wants to say a word before, if you can, Andrew.
Yeah, I understand that Ian Williams, right, are supposed to contact the tenant before anything's done, i.e. by normally a text message. That's how I understand it. In the first instance, as soon as they get the request from Waverley to attend somewhere, this is coming direct from Ian Williams. They do contact or are supposed to contact with a view to making an appointment or the tenant being aware.
Yeah, I think that the appointments, unless it's an emergency, should always be
Yeah.
made.
Yeah,
But I'll pass it over.
yeah.
I mean, obviously there are individual cases which I'm not aware of, so we'll have to look at those offline. We did have a really informative discussion and sort of open workshop with Ian Williams last week or 2 weeks ago. And a lot of these issues were raised. They have recognised that things like things like scaffold is obviously subcontractors, and there's this miscommunication between Ian Williams and their subcontractors, and they recognise that. So we've got some good plans in place how to get that rectified. But you're absolutely right. It doesn't matter who it is. Ian Williams, as you see it, or Waverley, as you see it, should be contacting you or the tenant prior to any scaffold going up. So I'm happy to look at these cases afterwards if you want, and I can have a delve.
Surely, as far as the tenant's concerned, it's Ian Williams scaffolding.
Yeah, that's what I say. It's, as far as it's Ian Williams, but it's in reality it's a subcontractor. But you're right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
It's Ian Williams. Doesn't matter who's doing it. You see it's Ian Williams.
Which should
but Ian Williams
should be refer to this text message.
Yeah, Ian Williams will be contacting you, or should be contacting you for the tenant to advise.
Yeah,
I'm happy to take it offline.
Thank you, Matt. Maybe
Yes, right. Danielle has sent her apologies that she can't make it today, but she did drop some of us a little note, which probably fits in here, and I'll pass it over to you, Leila. Danielle says, I think both. Also, while she's writing to us with her apologies, she notices that the decant policy and relet policy seem to have disappeared during the local elections. Where has she been? I think both of these are really important things for us to go over. They are also a great opportunity to get some feedback from tenants who have recently been involved in these things. Danielle goes on to say that she can see it as nothing but a positive thing for more direct involvement from tenants that know the most about a specific subject. Firstly, they will feel involved and heard, as indeed they will be, thus improving satisfaction. And secondly, the council will be not just paying lip service to tenant involvement, but will be listening to a wider reach of relevant voices within from their tenants. The relet policy is also a great opportunity to look at the most sustainable options and to get tenants involved in their homes even before keys have been handed over. And she ends by saying, I think some work here could be very valuable. I guess we'll take a note of that. It's not explicitly a question, but we'll feed that back into the work programme.
No, I'm happy to comment on those questions. Absolutely. You'll see that the decant policy and the relet review are on the forward plan. To be completely frank, it's been about resources and our ability to complete those pieces of work. They are in progress. We have done some work with the relet review with actually contacting tenants who've recently moved into their homes. So we are getting tenant experiences. Daniela is right. We've had some recent decants that haven't gone as well as they should have done. And we've forensically looked at those and taken out lessons learned and applying the learning from that into the new processes. So absolutely agree with what she said. We are doing those things. It's just taking us a little longer than we'd expected because the government and the regulator and the council keep giving us new tasks to do as well.
And as I understand it from previous conversation, tenants panel and those others interested people will be.
Absolutely. Sorry, my last point of that was that we need to work with Terry to get dates to speak with the tenants panel about our about our plans. You are not forgotten. You're very live in my mind. It's just I forgot that at that precise moment in time.
Thank you. Are there any further questions on this subject? Thank you very much. So we now move over to Steph, I believe is going to do the housing service damp and mold policy. Thank you.
Thank you. So following on from presenting the management and action plan for damp and mould in February, I am pleased to now present a damp and mould policy. We've had a lot of steering and guidance from a number of significant reports, including the Housing Ombudsman Spotlight Report in October 2021 on damp and mould, as well as the Regulator for Social Housing, the initial findings report in February 23, and the Lessons Learned report in June 2023. As well as that, we've also had recommendations from our barrister as well, who has been looking at our disrepair claims relating to damp and mould. The overall recommendation was to have a specific damp and mould policy to ensure that cases are managed and dealt with in a timely manner with an understanding of the urgency and the importance. The purpose of this policy is to direct management and delivery of a damp and mould service to all Waverley Borough Council properties, enabling the council to provide and maintain warm and dry, healthy homes for tenants. So the main points of the policy is to reassure tenants and staff that the council will take all damp and mould cases seriously, will take responsibility as the landlord, meeting our statutory and regulatory obligations. We have specified that all reports of damp and mould must be investigated with at least an initial inspection at the property, which is currently not the process. So it's a new thing going forward. We are very keen to have encouraged strong landlord-tenant relationships, and we'll provide ongoing support and education and guidance to tenants with the ways in which they can reduce and manage condensation levels within their home. So as well as these main points, the policy is all about record keeping, which is a big area that we know we need to improve on. Record keeping and regular correspondence with tenants throughout the process, from reporting the repair to getting the remedial works completed. As well as this, we've introduced follow-ups. So for any case of mould or damp, we will be undertaking follow-up. The case will be recorded. We're creating a damp tracker, which means that within six months following remedial works, we'll follow it up, and 12 months we'll follow it up. So cases are not going to get forgotten and lost. As well as this, we are building a case management IT system on our computer system, which will help with achieving all of these new actions. Timescales for this, timescales for inspections and completion of works are detailed in our accompanied procedure, which we have plans to share with the customer experience group and the tenants panel. I'll now pass over to Matt to talk about how he plans to implement the policy.
So as Steph, it's a moving forward, and it has been a bit of a work in progress. In short, it sort of comes down to three areas. So it's very much a cultural change. So that's including officers, so not just the technical officers, but housing officers, anybody that visits a tenant is understanding what mold or damp is, and not walking by and actually recording it. So it's very much a cultural thing for officers. contractors as well. So again, we're engaging with Ian Williams to ensure that they are fully trained to deal with any mould effectively. So they're having, so they need to be doing it according to the specifications. And also tenants as well. It's engaging with tenants about how to prevent mould actually starting. So it's a cultural thing for officers, contractors and tenants. There's also training. So we are engaging with training for our technical officers, and we've got a day and a half in-depth training coming up in September, which all our officers will be going on. It's training with the contractors as well. So they have been given some, or will be going through training with mould consultants about how to apply mould treatment. So it's not just a case of a decorator turns up and cleans it off with a wipe and then paints over it. It's got to be dealt with properly, and we need to have evidence of that. And then resources, that's in additional resources that we need to carry these out and to ensure that we carry out these inspections and the follow-ups, and also specialist resources. So we are in the process of procuring some specialists that can help us or help the inspectors or the guys out on the street to understand if it's a little bit more technical or if it needs further investigation. So it is a work in progress. We are now having sort of regular meetings with the people that can drive this through Ian Williams and internally, but we hope to be able to sort of give some additional feedback over the next couple of months. Also, just as a point, we, as you'll be aware, we've got stock condition surveys going on, and we're probably about 20% of the way through these now, and they are already bringing out a number of properties that have got damp and mould, from very slight to more progressive damp and mould. But I think we see that as a positive thing. You know, it's being proactive. We can deal with these now. Hopefully that will mean less over the winter period. So yeah, that's our implementation program.
Thank you. No, thank you, Steph. Very clear. Pleased to see that you picked up the timescale thing as well, and that would be good to see that procedure policy out at some time. Maybe copy that to all the board members. But Chris, you have a question?
Yeah, can I ask? Yeah, we've got the policy in place, etc., and so forth. But what is happening now to ones that have already been reported, etc.?
So inspectors have been going out. There is resources has been an issue, so it's been a bit of a delay to get inspectors out. But when they are out, they will be looking at that and then scoping up the works to get done. I think historically we've not done that. We've probably made assumptions and works have been carried out. But from now on, that's the plan. That's how we're going to be progressing it.
Yeah, but I have a situation. One of my tenants, I'm chair of a local residents group in Hazelmere, and one of my tenants now has been on about mould and damp and mould. He's had 3 visits from, I understand, surveyors, and all of them have done exactly the same thing. They've given him a piece of paper, a pamphlet about damp and mould, and told him to open his windows and doors. Well, yeah, you can't. They can't do that. They cannot do that. But what I'm saying is that's fine 3 times, and now since I think it's December, I can't remember the actual dates and everything, but since December it's gone absolutely quiet. Nothing's happened.
Again, I'm happy to take it off from you afterwards. Not what should be happening. So we should be recording every case on this case management tracker, so we don't lose sight. Well, I think we'd hold our hands up to say we lose sight of some of these things. You do a job, you treat it, you move on, and it's gone in the ether of other jobs. So every damp and mould will be tracked, will be logged. If it's not logged, I'll be concerned, but we can look at that if it's logged, and then, as Steph said, after 6 months we will proactively go back and make sure that it's still still not there, you know, it's been rented.
So what you're saying in this instance, it's going to be 6 months
No,
from
we deal with it.
December.
No. I mean, it should be on there, so I don't know this case obviously, but
Yeah.
it should be on, you should be dealing with it and we'll get it dealt with. And only when it's dealt with and you know, remedied, then we will proactively check after 6 months. But if it's not
Yeah.
remedied, then we need to deal with that. So I'm
So
happy
it's
to have a look at it afterwards.
It's one of my pet situations, if you like. It's a question of communication again. He's sitting there, the tenant's sitting there since December. Absolutely nothing's been said to him about what's going on. You know,
I'll have a look. I'm happy to take it off from you afterwards and I can look into it.
okay.
Thank you. John?
Yes, thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank the officers very much for bringing what is obviously a very comprehensive report here. I remember talking about introducing this about 6 months or so ago. So thank you very much for getting it here in more or less a finished form and in ahead of the winter. So hopefully we can get ahead of when this starts to happen. My question is on page 18, the redecoration. Minor points, but it says on a case-by-case basis, in certain circumstances, the council may carry out redecoration works and will consider how best to assist vulnerable or disabled tenants with redecoration. So my first point is, what do you mean by assist? That doesn't mean we will do it. That means presumably, well, I don't know what it means, so I'm asking the question. And the second bit is, where there is damage due to disrepair, the obligation on the landlord to both repair and make good. What do you mean by disrepair? Could I just have a sort of technical answer to that? Thank you.
So with regards to the disrepair, that would be something like where the landlord has not carried out their obligation to maintain a property. So if we haven't, I think, for example, if the rendering has not been kept in good condition, which has caused rain to get in, causing a water damage within the property, that would be our obligation to redecorate, remedy. And with regards to the case-by-case assistance, that could involve, it could involve, and there have been cases where we've provided a decoration voucher if it's financial assistance that's needed. We may offer a decorator. I'm not sure. It would have to be on a case-by-case basis, as it says. But we're not. I think the main point of this statement is that we're not going to walk away and leave you with an unfinished, undecorated property if you're unable to do so yourself.
Yeah, thank you. That was my main concern. That obviously, if there was a vulnerable person, that somebody would walk away, the landlord, whoever it is, and then just say, well, yeah, well, you can get it done. Here's some vouchers. Goodbye. Yeah, that I feel that's one of the main messages we want from this policy, is that at no point can we just walk away as landlords. We will do all that we can to assist in A, resolving the damp and the mould, and B, in the redecoration, putting things right afterwards.
Jackie?
Thank you. On page 17, I'm really pleased to note that that now inspections are actually looking at the whole house approach and looking at the fabric, because that was something I raised at a meeting a few meetings ago, that, you know, mold can be part of the brick and mortar of a building and causing that problem. So I'm really pleased to see that that's now included into this report. Thank you.
Alan, go ahead.
Yeah, just I know you've been looking at the stock, the housing stock, and you're only part of the way through it. But how big a problem is this? I know you sort of said some have got very slight mold, some have got quite severe mold. Just how many properties out of the 20% you've looked at have actually got a mold problem?
It's a little bit of an unknown because we haven't had great information on our stock up until the past. So now we've done stock condition survey, or we're progressing through stock condition surveys We've identified out of 1,000 about 70 odd cases of damp and mould. Again, they may be slight or maybe more that we're aware of. So whatever that percentage is, I don't know off the top of my head, but so but that's on a proactive stance. But it has been quite reactive. You know, we're only finding out when tenants call in, or if we are in a property doing a kitchen and bathroom, and then we find it somewhere else. So that's why I say it's kind of a cultural thing that we want tenants to engage with us and report it, and don't just sit there and looking at it. So we want them to engage with it and report it. So.
Thank you. And I think the key thing for tenants is to report. We must remember to report. And if we don't get action, is to report again and keep pressurising. But thank you both for that report. Any further questions? Thank you. So now we're over to Drew. Sorry, you're doing the service fire safety policy.
Thank you and good morning. So the first item I've been asked to present is we had a recent review of the fire safety policy. We're approaching the chair to take a formal decision from co-portfolio holder for housing and executive head of housing to approve this revised policy. So just to give you a bit of background, the existing fire safety policy was first approved by council in 2017 and set the framework for how Waverley will manage fire safety in all its assets. It was a joint policy between the housing team and the corporate team that managed this building and various others. And basically the policy sets a framework and objectives of how we're going to manage fire safety, and basically priorities a benchmark so we can show whether we're achieving those goals or not and meeting our obligations. So the existing policy has been subject to periodic review and was last reviewed in 2021. But over that period, the policies remain largely unchanged, just because the legislation hadn't really been changing. However, given recent changes in legislation, so it became necessary to review the policy ahead of its usual schedule to ensure the council continues to address any new requirements under legislation. So that was from the Building Safety Act and the Fire Safety Act. They introduced quite a few new requirements on Waverley as a landlord, so we need to make sure that we're meeting those obligations. At the same time, the housing team are quite keen to split the policy away from the corporate team, because the focus on housing had become a bit more stringent and things hadn't really changed for the corporate team. It was becoming harder to clearly define in the policy what related to housing, what related to corporate buildings. So I think last year, the emergency planning officer had already carried out their own review of the policy and written their own corporate fire safety policy. So thankfully the split was fairly easy, and going forward, the policy being proposed will just focus on the housing assets. My apologies, I couldn't make it to the briefing on Monday. However, Matt Alexander did feedback that there had been a few comments on the policy, and those have been taken on board. So I'll just run through those now. So I gather there was a query around CDM and sort of providing some clarity on what that meant. So I've gone back through the policy and made it a bit clearer what that means. I gather there was a suggestion about having a tenant representative at the twice yearly senior living reviews. So since Monday, I've had a discussion with David Brown, and we're both happy to take that on board. So David's going to speak to his managers and start to identify volunteers from each of the senior living schemes. So when we next go around for the sort of safety inspections, we'll take at least one tenant representative around with us to take part. And finally, I gather there was some ambiguity around the use of biannual in regard to the senior living inspections. So I've gone through and substituted that for twice yearly, just so it's a bit clearer on how often we're doing it. Yes, that's a summary on that. The proposal for the policy. To open it up if there's any more questions.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for reacting to our questions from the pre-meeting. That's quite clear now. But just to go back on that first bit, that's design, management, and I've lost it myself now.
Construction, design and management.
Right, yeah, DM's DDM, isn't it? Yeah. Thank you. Great. So you made it clear anyway now. Thank you. Chris.
I think we still prefer coverage there as well.
Can I just ask, generally the policy seems to be purely for multi-floor properties, so i.e. senior living and stuff like that. How do you get across a situation to tenants generally? I mean, in the houses and bungalows and stuff like that, I don't suppose they're even aware that there's this policy.
The policy is all encompassing, so it does cover houses and bungalows and anything that would affect them. So we're required to provide smoke detectors, for example, things like that. We're required to carry out the gas service, so it kind of links into that as well. The policy is published on the Waverley website, and in communication, it occasionally gets referred to. So if tenants want to have a look at it, once the policy is approved, I'm happy to arrange for communication with tenants to let them know the new policy has been made available if anyone wanted to see it.
Would this policy be included in the tenant's pack at the start of their tenancy or something like that? I mean, I must admit, I've never seen one before at all. I'm a tenant,
Of course, it's quite a large policy, so maybe including the whole thing might be a bit overkill. But we have recently started adding basically a shortened summary of what fire
there can be a
safety
synopsis,
effects.
can't there?
Yeah, it's basically I think it's 2 sides of A4 that we're now including, basically just general fire safety advice and links to the fire safety information on our website. So if tenants want more information, it's readily available.
But that comes down to again my point about communication. Not everybody has the facility to go online at all,
Okay,
especially
Chris.
tenants.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. To cut you short, really, just to we take the point there. That's a very good point about what happens to to the tenants in the smaller bungalows, but places. I know Jackie was a question. If I let Annalise answer first, maybe she'll answer your question.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to your question and to reiterate really what Drew was saying. So as a landlord, we have a duty and a regulatory responsibility to have a whole host of policies. But I don't think any tenant would want 25 pages, and that's why we're trying to limit them in size. So what we need to ensure is that they are accessible, so they are available online for those people. But the other thing to say is that we have the regular tenants newsletter where we communicate key information, and fire risk is on a cycle for that. We'll often have, if you go back and look at your last 4 editions of Homes and People, I reckon you'll probably see fire in it at least 3 times. And the other thing to say is when we get new tenants in, they get a handover pack of information and key information about how to be safe, how to be a good tenant, what's your rights and responsibilities. And as Drew said, he's simplified some information to make that available in that handover pack. So we are communicating in a range of ways to get that information through to people.
Thank you. I think Hugh just wants to add something before then.
I think though Chris has made quite a good point, because we have focused on the blocks of flats, and that's where the legislation focuses on, and Drew has written the letters to those tenants about fire safety. And I think what we need to take away is that wider communication with everybody, because the fires do happen in individual properties, bungalows and properties. So I think that is a very good point. But the legislation has made us focus on blocks of flats, and that's, you know, Drew and the team do some fantastic work making those blocks of flats safe. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you. Well, Annalise has picked up the point that I was going to make, that in actual fact, you know, I've seen the magazine that goes out to tenants, and it has been in there on several occasions. But I mean, you know, fire safety really is down to the tenant, and it's whether you can't force them to put these smoke alarms up, but you hope they do. And it may be that, you know, once a year, a letter goes out to the tenants reminding them that they should be making sure that they have, you know, sort of smoke detectors and that in their homes. But I mean, you know, I mean, if it's in the magazine, most people should see it. Maybe it should be a front page thing.
Thank you. John.
Yes, thanks, Chairman. When we have a block of flats and we're the landlord, it's fine. When perhaps we sell some of those off, you've just mentioned that the responsibility, and you'd write to them to make sure that the ones that we own have the alarms and smoke detectors. If we sell flats off, do we still write to them? Because obviously the safety is still there for all the tenants in that block of flats, regardless of who actually owns it. So I'm a little bit concerned that we wouldn't follow that up. Perhaps I could.
I can answer part of that. So under the new legislation, one of the requirements is we have to write to all occupiers in a flat block. So a leaseholder would get a letter advising them on fire safety. We have less control over the smoke detector parks. Obviously, we're no longer their landlord, but I can pick up with the home ownership team to see what controls we have got to require them to install smoke detectors, because you're quite right, there is a risk to the rest of the building if they haven't got them. I can pick that up after this.
Yeah, thank you very much. If I could have a follow up to that at some point, thank you.
All I was going to say is that the council are responsible for the smoke, fire and gas alarms. The residents shouldn't be touching them at all, because a lot of them are hardwired, and it's really, that's for the council. If any problem, it should be reported to Waverley, obviously. Thank you. Thank you. And I'd just like to add that, you know, as a tenant, that I know that part of the gas safety check annually, that they check the alarms. So I presume that as part of their servicing, and we've had new ones fitted fairly recently. So I think individual tenants will get that, at least that support with their alarms. Any other questions on that? Thank you, Joe. Thank you for that report.
Yeah, just to clarify, yeah, this report is recommending that the portfolio holder for housing gives the head of housing the authority to buy back one bungalow in Shamley Green. You may ask the question why. This all starts with the regulatory standard where, as a landlord, we're required to develop and deliver services that address under-occupation and overcrowding. And at this meeting about 18 months ago, we sort of talked about the policy and the officer who's addressing under occupation, the easy move officer. And then this officer's now been in post for 18 months. And over that 18 months, she's managed to rehouse 58 people, i.e. downsize 58 people. And the outcome is the council has got 58 3, 4-bedroom properties, it probably wouldn't have got, or nowhere near that number, if that role hadn't been in place and that the grants that were available to achieve that. So this property is being purchased, is a 1-bedroom bungalow to actually support that policy and that success. So what we're looking to do is allocate this to someone who's got a 3 or 4-bedroom house, who wants to downsize and wants a bungalow. So in fact, by buying this bungalow, we are actually going to get a 3, 4-bedroom house out of it. So that is the reason why I think we should purchase this property. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris, question.
Yeah, can I ask a question with regard to this buyback situation? If a tenant purchases their property and then they, at a later stage, they want to sell it or move on or whatever, do they have to contact the council first? Do you get first refusal? Do you? Oh, okay. Yeah, that's all built into this buyback.
That's all part of the right to buy legislation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any further questions? I have to say that buying back is, at least it puts another one in the portfolio, so that's got to be a good thing. Thank you. Robert.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm not sure I can discuss this too far because it's in the confidential papers. I'm just concerned that the amount of money to get up to a lettable standard. Is that a discussion somewhere else?
John, if you want to go into exempt to talk in specific details about that, we'd have to throw out everybody, our members. But if you can, if we can stay particularly general, like not indicate any, as you would know, any numbers, I guess we can help you with that.
Yeah, I just wanted a rough idea of why it's, to me, a rather large sum to get it back into lettable standard. That was all. Is there an answer? Is this a general figure? I mean, it does seem quite high to me.
I think, Chair, we're using this opportunity to bring this property up to the highest standard and in terms of energy efficiency as well. So that's why that encompasses all. That's why we've put in that 20,000. We haven't, directly specified the work, but we're just sort of indicating that could be the highest amount that we spend. We're not actually asking for that budget. That budget is already there within the team's budgets. So I think it was just identifying that could be the cost if we have to replace the bathroom and the kitchen and the heating system and whatever. But we haven't got a detailed specification of works yet. And I really don't believe we would spend up to 20,000, but I think it's just to make members aware that there could be that amount of money to be spent on the property. But if we did spend that amount of money, that would be it probably for the next 30 years. That would be the total investment to that property. But it hasn't been damaged, or it's been maintained. It's just really those components that we would replace. We probably may just need to do them now.
Thank you.
And I think I have to agree that, that while we've got the opportunity that the house is empty, let's bring it up to the highest standard we can and save yourself work later on and tenants moving around. But thank you. Any other comments on that? And we're now back to Drew, please, for the procurement process. The same procedure as was mentioned by our chair earlier about facts and figures.
Yes, so back to me, thank you. Yes, this time I'm come to seek formal decision from co-portfolio holder for housing on awarding fire equipment servicing contract with SureServe Fire and Electrical. So it was a few months back, our legal team identified that our existing contract with SureServe wasn't completely compliant. Basically, long story short, the contract value was put slightly too low based on previous work with the previous contractor. And during the course of SureServe sort of doing their regular checks, additional work was identified that was required to bring our fire equipment systems up to a compliance standard. And so the cost of the level of work that has been completed basically put the work over the EU's threshold for goods and services, because we'd exceeded that, or we were due to exceed that value. It put us open to challenge from other bidders on the tender a couple of years ago. So having consulted with our procurement officer and the legal team, it was agreed that the best route to sort of remedy this situation was to direct award a new contract to SureServe through a framework provider, whereby the framework would have procured under a much higher value. And in doing so, we can put a more accurate contract value to this new contract, that basically better reflects what's actually the reality of, you know, the cost of running our fire equipment systems. So following this, we approached Fusion 21 framework and have had discussions about what our requirements are. So the type of equipment we've got, the number of assets, that sort of thing, the locations. And they completed an assessment for us of their framework contractors, and SureServe came out on top. And basically we've carried out our own due diligence to confirm that we're still happy to proceed with them. There's no significant increase in the cost of remaining with them. So we're therefore asking for approval to award this contract to SureServe.
Thank you, Drew. Chris?
Can I ask, won't this happen again, this situation with this overspend? You know, if it all stays the same, you know, and remains the same, surely this could occur again.
It should do that, because where we've increased the contract value and we've amended the terms of the contract so it better reflects what's actually required under this contract. We shouldn't be in a situation where we're having issues with the way the contract's being tendered.
So what's the new contract figure then? Instead of this 150,000?
Can we not be specific about this? Otherwise, we will need to move into an exempt session, even just to answer you, Chris. So I think let's talk in general terms. I mean, one point, an obvious point anyway, about any contract is that it's a contract between two parties, and sometimes that contract can't be maintained well enough by one of those parties, and we've seen that with some repairs prior to Ian Williams coming through. So who knows what's going to happen in the next 4 years? But right now, we have a contract that we think is fine, that will provide us with support over the next period, and keep your fingers crossed, Chris. Of course, we might win out in the end of it.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? So we'll now move on a report back from Annalise's conference in Manchester.
Just make your own hold music for a second. Okay, thank you. So myself and a few of the team members and some tenants attended Brighton in May, which is the Chartered Institute of Housing London and South East's conference. They hold it every year. And then myself and some of the team attended Housing 2023 in June in Manchester, which is the national conference. So we've picked up lots of interesting facts and good practice and initiatives and ideas. So I thought it would be best to share them with the board. I have to say, I think somebody might have just said jolly. I wouldn't class going to a conference as a jolly personally. It's very intense. There are a lot of exhibitors, a lot of sessions to attend, a lot of information to process. I think on the first day in Manchester, I went to 7 sessions and was fit for nothing by the end of it. But it's really good to hear from a range of people. So there were politicians in Manchester, the Shadow Housing Secretary and the Housing Secretary herself, Housing Association Chief Executives, tenants, local experts, political commentary, people from recruitment sessions, how to work with climate change, homelessness. I went to a session about lessons learned from the Ukraine Homes for Ukraine programme, older people housing. There was an amazing session where a housing association were building not sheltered accommodation, but just homes that were fit, that were designed for older people right in the centre of the city. They were building them above the library and coffee shops. It was amazing to see. We heard a lot from the regulator. I think you'll all remember that Kate Dodsworth came to speak to us, did a tenant member briefing back in February. So those same messages are coming through. And as I said, then there was a whole host of contractors. So the team who came with me didn't have a delegate pass to hear all the keynote speakers, but they were able to attend the conference hall, which was full of IT providers, energy providers, consultants, different home improvements, as well as some fringe events where there was different conversations about domestic abuse and data, and lots of really interesting information. So I have to say the first day, as well as being overwhelmed, I was, to be quite frank, a little depressed at the state of the nation. We're all very well rehearsed with the challenges to housing and the national context we're in. But it's just quite shameful that we're still talking about a housing crisis after 20 years. Things haven't changed. We're still dealing with the fallout of the pandemic and the impact that's had on people and the real split in society now. I was reading an article the other day about how children are getting left behind in school because some parents are paying for extra tuition, and parents who can't do that because of the cost of living crisis and living on the breadline, their children are going to suffer in the long term. We all know about inflation and that's happened. We've seen that with the Housing Revenue Account Business Plan. You know, how much does it cost to actually get a repair done now and build new homes? And then I found the political arena was really quite interesting, but again, a little bit disheartening, because housing for the first time has got really high in the national consciousness, because we've had this housing crisis for 2 years. We've got a lot of people, we've got a mass increase in homelessness. We have a lot of people who are now seeing that their children and grandchildren who may have been to university or got a good job can't get on the housing ladder. So there really should be a national movement to actually solve this issue. But it just appears that the politicians are a little bit scared. And actually, if somebody stood up and said, this is my plan for housing, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. Yes, we might have some challenges on this side, but ultimately, we're going to create new homes that's going to give employment, give people opportunities, make sure people are living in safe, warm homes, should be the general election winner. So we'll wait to see what the manifestos come out with. But having seen both politicians on the stage in Manchester, I'm not holding my breath. And then the other thing to say, and it's really sad, we've all seen since Grenfell, the reputation of social housing is at an all-time low. And that's not the situation that we want to be in. We've got lots of social commentators, there's been a lot of IT news. So all this is kind of the backdrop to the challenges that we're all facing. So the three themes that kind of came out of the sessions for me were about supply. So as I say, that housing crisis, how do we increase supply? One political commentator just said, well, if we just sold land at an affordable price with a stipulation that you're going to build affordable housing, that'd be it. We need to challenge the builders who seem to drip feed properties through and want to build big houses because that's what they're going to make the most money from. I think within the UK, we see housing as a financial asset, not as a human right. So I think that needs to be a change. Safety, as ever, since Grenfell has been a big issue for everybody. So it's not only the fire safety rules that everybody's got. I was speaking to one chief executive who was giving me eye-watering amounts of money he needed to deal with the cladding on some of their tower blocks. But it's that local safety as well. It's those home improvements. It's dealing with damp and mold. It's dealing with Legionella, the top 6 that we've got Matt in place and his team to make sure that our homes are safe. And then the other thing is, the other big S is sustainability. So that's all your reducing carbon emissions, having homes that are green and safe. And it'd be really interesting for us once we get those pilots on Oxford Ridge up and running and actually see what an energy efficient home looks like. And does it look like we expected it to look? And is it performing like we expected it to? And then the underpinning of all this, which doesn't really show on my slide, is regulation. So as I said, you've seen the regulator of social housing face-to-face on the big screen. And everything that any social landlord is doing is going to be looked at by the regulator. We know there's challenges, we know there's issues, but we've now got to, it's the first time that there's real rules around what social landlords should be providing for customers. All the focus has been on finance and governance, and the consumer and the actual person living in the home has been a little bit left behind. But now we're in a really good opportunity that everybody's going to be scrutinised and held to account. So talking about the proactive consumer regulation, these are the things that we need to be thinking about. All social landlords need to make sure that they've got true tenant engagement. We need to make sure that we've got the data, we understand our stock, we understand our tenants. We're making great strides with that with the stock condition survey. We've got more work to do on that about understanding who lives in our homes. We need to make sure that our systems and processes are fit for purpose. We need to be able to evidence what we're doing and what the results are. And all social landlords need to make sure that they've got clear leadership, they've got a positive culture, and that they're transparent so that tenants, members, the public can see what services you're delivering, at what cost, and being open to have those difficult conversations where things have gone wrong. This is Lara, she's the president for the Chartered Institute of Housing. She did a keynote speech at the end of the sessions, which started off quite negatively, saying all the things she was cross about social housing. It was cross that it took the death of a 2-year-old to make people act, how she was cross that people weren't treated with respect. She also did say some of the good things that people are doing. And fundamentally, her benchmark is any email you send, any repair you do, if it's not good enough for my mum, then it's not good enough for a tenant. And this really echoed one of the presentations I'd been to from a housing association in the Northeast, and their customer service culture was all about my mam and my gran. No, my mam and my nan. And I don't know what that is down here, but essentially it was when you're at work, if your mum wouldn't be proud of what you were doing, don't do it. And if you wouldn't do it to your nan, if that service isn't good enough for your nan, then don't do it. And I think that's really a way to put tenants at the heart of what we're delivering as a service. So the takeaways from me from an exhausting 3 days was collectively we need to be more positive and do a positive narrative about social housing. We do some good things. There are some big organisations that don't understand everything that's going on in there. in their organisation. And regretfully, there are situations where homes aren't in a good condition, but we need to know that and make those changes. And there's lots of positivity about what social landlords do for their tenants, for their communities, and make a big difference to society. When it comes to supply, my only solution is let's go back to Beveridge. Let's go back to building council homes at scale and at pace. And I wish I had a magic wand for that. One of the most inspiring people I saw was Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Manchester. If you ever get a chance to listen to him, he's absolutely amazing. And not being political at all, but I wish we could have his magic wand over the whole of the country. He's set a manifesto for, in 15 years' time, everybody in Manchester will have a safe home to live in. He's got plans to end homelessness. He's got plans to tackle dodgy private landlords. He's got investment into building new homes. So it'd be really good to watch that come through. My third takeaway is we are at the precipice of the Social Housing Regulation Bill being given royal assent. The minute that royal assent happens, and I keep being promised it's going to happen before the end of parliamentary session, but we're running out of days, the regulator and the Department of Levelling Up and Communities have got all their consultations ready. The minute the royal assent happens, they're going to be sending out consultations. So we need to be prepared for that. So I am going to be getting in touch with everybody in August if these consultations come out. And then finally, we've spoken about it before. It's about making sure we've got our own house in order, making sure we're getting the basics right, that we've got the data. We're focusing on customer service. We're doing self-assessments against the regulatory standards, and we're giving you as a board assurances that we're meeting those standards and delivering good services. And that was my run through from Housing 2023. I'm happy to take any questions.
Annalisa, fantastic. You've got my vote for the Annalisa party. Just some obvious things, yes. You know, 1 million homes this year, please. That would help us down the track. Number of obvious things too, in terms of planning applications that have been completely finished by us and granted, over 4,000, and not a spade in the ground. So it's not local authorities that are dilly-dallying on house building. It's the developers who are, in my opinion, land banking. I'd like to see if we can deliver that, your presentation to the exec at a briefing. Maybe we can just cut it out and send it to them for their holiday snaps or something like that. But it was, thank you very much. And I hope you had a good time as well.
Thank you. Any other questions? Well, I'd just like to say from the 10 panel, the opportunity to go to some of these conferences is very good. We learn a lot. We see what other tenants think about the services that are being provided, and we get to hear about future plans. Very good, and I'd like to thank Waverley for financing that, and that next year, hopefully, more of the tenant panel and other interesting parties, maybe some of the councillors would like to come along and see what these and staff and officers see what these conferences are like. Really good. Thank you. John.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's a question you could answer, but a couple of things from planning. I think it's a good idea to take that to the executive. We did agree at full council earlier on, we're going to go back to PP1, which is the first planning, to obviously consult and see if we've got any more spare land. Our biggest problem here is land, as we all know. I mean, for example, in Hazelmere, I'm not sure how many social houses we could build. We have some plans for some, but once they're used up, I just cannot see any land becoming available to build social housing. And to go on to the affordable bit, I'm absolutely fed up with getting affordable housing agreed, And then the developers come to us and say, sorry, our viability study says we can no longer afford to build those affordable houses. And they just go ahead and don't build them. I don't know, I can't expect any answers, but all I'm saying is, yes, I'm somewhat depressed on the way that housing is being treated by the government under their legislation. And we need more freedom for the planners rather than developers.
But I dare say that that's why we elected some of these councillors. But thank you. If there's any other questions, you too.
I mean, I tell you, I think this is why this is important in this meeting. We can only control what we can control, and that's the effective management of our housing, our own homes. So that's why it's important this committee does look at voids, does look at things like easy move, how we can effectively, use our homes to actually tackle these problems. And I think that's the one of the things I got out of Annalise's presentation, is that responsibility that we've all got in this room, is to ensure that what we've got, we make sure we use it as best as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. I agree with that. And what's the bet not going to get the opportunity to use me mam and me nan in some correspondence very shortly?
I really wasn't sure what the southern equivalent was. Is it?
Mum and me gran.
Yeah, my mum and my grand, yeah. Thank you. We're now back to Annalise again for the work programme. Oh, sorry, I missed you out, Andrew. Yeah, yes, please, carry on.
You completely bypassed me, but never mind. I was actually going to begin my very brief sort of comments to the board today with exactly what Mr. Wagstaff said, which is about how we as a landlord are working hard and must continue to work hard to, as it were, sort of keep our house in order and improve the things that we all do together. And my first point really was now we do have a fully staffed compliance team for the first time in a long time. And we know that the health and safety of our tenants, of our homes, is the highest priority. And Matt has worked really hard since he's been in post to put together a team now that we have. And so hopefully we'll see that really working well in the future. Matt, do you want to comment on that? I'm putting on the spot? No, he doesn't want to comment on that, but let's just say it's great to have that team. There's a couple of things coming up over the summer because we won't be having a meeting in August. So there are two decisions that will be made by the executive over the summer. One is another buyback, and this is a 3-bedroom home that we sold to a housing association some while ago for supported housing with a restricted covenant on it. And we've now been able to buy that back at a very good price. So a 3-bed family home comes back into stock, and that paper will be coming through during the summer for approval, hopefully. And then the other one is a variation to our gas contract to include the communal boilers and plant rooms. And again, we've negotiated with Smith and Byford on that. So that is going to come forward. That's on the forward plan for the executive, and they will hopefully be approved during the summer. So other than that, really, I don't have any other comments, but I'm going to have to try and get myself to conference next year. I haven't been to conference for a long time. I always think I'm too busy, but actually you have to take sort of time out to get depressed and inspired, as Annalisa was. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Don't stay in the same hotel as I did in Brighton. It's not there now, actually. Thank you. So we now come back to Annalise.
Yes, thank you. So we circulated the work plan after the agenda items went out, so hopefully you had those. So for September, we'll have the Q1 performance report. As already mentioned, we'll have a progress report about responsive repairs and voids with Ian Williams attending, and Matt, and potentially the officer responsible for managing the responsive repairs and voids contract. And also, hopefully we'll be coming back with some information about the asset management IT solution that we're hoping to procure and to be confirmed, but hopefully we'll be having a consultation. We'll be having a meet. We'll be able to talk about the consultation documents that have come out about the social housing regulatory bill hopefully we'll be in a position to do that then. I'm happy to take any additional items, or if any of the items are unclear.
Any questions? Very good, thank you. No question.
Can I just ask, we've successfully gone through the agenda, and I just wanted to confirm that the board you're the Landlord Services Advisory Board, and you should be advising Councillor Rivers about the papers you've just seen today. Are you happy for him to progress with the recommendations that were on the reports?
Well, I take it that that's unanimous. You didn't know it was all going to be your fault, did you? No, thank you. Yeah, I mean, what Annalisa is just referring to is that, I mean, I'll kick it off at 11:30, but there is a formal process to go through, and a number of things that the exec and yourselves and ONSs have agreed to, that in my infinite capacity, if only it was, that I have to record the fact that we've agreed to it. So that'll start off at about 11:30, and with any luck should be finished by 11:35. You don't need to be here for that. You can chat away, perhaps not in here at the time, but I'm glad that you're all involved, and I'm glad that terrifically that you've agreed. You may not be so good next time, but we'll see. Thank you all very much.
And it just leaves me to say thank you for attending, and our chair has said you can have next month off, and
Yes.
we'll see you all again in September the 28th, I believe. Thank you very much.
Anniversary.
Yeah.
Day before my anniversary. And hopefully also my wife's anniversary.